This podcast is supported by the Newman School at the Talmud Torah of St. Paul, where academic excellence and Jewish values meet, teaching analytical and critical thinking skills that are necessary to thrive in a complex world. Now enrolling grades K through 5. Learn more at ttsp.org/Newman. Welcome to this week's Who the Folk podcast. I'm Lonny Goldsmith, the editor of TC Jewfolk. This week I talked to Becca Mayo, the marketing and outreach coordinator at the MSP Film Society, which puts on the Minneapolis-St. Paul International Film Festival, which starts this year on May 5th. We talk about some of the many films of Jewish interest this year, how she found this side of the film business, and what has kept an East Coaster in the Twin Cities on this week's Who the Folk podcast. Becca Mayo, welcome to the Who the Folk podcast. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
I'm happy to talk to you too. You are the marketing and outreach associate for the MSP Film Society, which puts on the annual Minneapolis-St. Paul International Film Festival. And you had emailed me a couple of weeks ago, as people are now listening to this, that there are a great number of films of Jewish interest that are coming to this year's festival, which is the 41st film festival here in the that MSP Film Society has put on. So I guess for starters, how do some of these films get chosen? What kind of process is there?
Yeah, so basically we have people watching films, going to film festivals year round. So that is primarily our programming director, Jesse Bishop, and our executive director, Susan Smolichowski, who go to these film festivals to see what would fit for our festival. So it's a lot of that. So it's a lot of traveling. We go to Sundance every year. Susan went to Berlinale. We have programmers who are attending festivals as well. So we have a couple different programmers on our team, and sometimes they'll have specific focuses. And so they'll be watching these types of films just at all these other festivals to see what's popular, to see what's coming. And then otherwise, if it's not through seeking them out, we open submissions at the end, shortly, usually a month after the festival ends. We open submissions so that filmmakers can submit their own works up until maybe January.
Okay. So I know that people know Cannes, they know Sundance, they know, Toronto is another really big one. I think every city, large or small, has some sort of film festival. Where does the MSP Festival sort of fit in the larger hierarchy of film festivals?
It's honestly, at least from my perspective, it's hard for me to see it as there being just one hierarchy as much as there are just different types of festivals, really. And I guess I say that because our festival, it's hard to compare it to another one because we do a Minnesota Made program where a big focus of our festival is spotlighting local filmmakers and celebrating them. And so obviously, at Ken, they're not going to have that type of program. It's really focused on international film, and our focus is equally as much on international film, but we really try to highlight and showcase Minnesota filmmakers to help their work get out there, because this is really such a great state for artists and filmmakers.
So one of the films that was in the list that you had sent me was just had a world premiere at Sundance a few months ago, where it won the U.S. Dramatic Audience Award. The movie is ChaCha Real Smooth. And it is, star, there's a Cooper Raiff is the star. He is a bar and bat mitzvah party starter. And obviously the name ChaCha Real Smooth really should, anybody who's been to a bar and bat mitzvah should know.
It speaks for itself.
It really kind of does. Dakota Johnson, well known, she is a producer. She stars in the movie as well. she's not Jewish, but there's obvious Jewish themes and Jewish interest, and it's not local to Minnesota, but it is obviously sort of more universal, right?
Yes.
In its themes.
Yes, and this is one of the films that I am most excited for personally. I've been following this film since it premiered at Sundance. And so I was really hoping we'd be able to book it for the festival because bar and bat mitzvahs, so many people, even if they're not Jewish, have gone to them. And I honestly, when I moved to Minnesota, that was maybe the first time that I met someone who said they had never been to one before. And, of course, that shocked me because what do you mean? You didn't know any Jewish people? That was a culture shock for me kind of moving here. But it gets me excited to have this kind of film that kind of centers around a bar mitzvah. So that way people can finally, who have never been to one, maybe get a better idea of what they were like.
So it sounds awesome. And again, having been through the circuit myself, having watched a high school junior go through it and a seventh grader going through it, I think it's going to be. It looks like it's going to be great and certainly something that resonates. But the other thing that was really interesting to me on this list is the number of films that are in Hebrew with English subtitles, Arabic and Hebrew. There's this sort of wide range of international films that center on Israel. Obviously there's more than 200 films in the festival. So, I'm sure there are films of many languages that are represented throughout. But when you're looking particularly at the international films, what is something that the festival looks for when it brings in a film like Greener Pastures, which is a Hebrew with English subtitled film from last year?
Yeah, I mean, I think what it comes down to is how well our programmers know our audience. Because, this is the 41st year, and the programmers that we work with, they've been working with us for years as well. So at this point, we know what our audience likes to come out to. They love documentaries. Documentaries are always a hit. And we really try to just take that into consideration, the taste of our audience, because we also do year-round programming. So even outside of the festival, we are always showing films that help us learn more about what our audience wants to see. And then from there, we're using that, but then also being guided by our mission, which is to unite and transform communities and individuals and inform them through film. So, that means that we're looking for films that either offer different perspectives or they are teaching you about something you didn't know before. And usually they have a theme of coming together in some way.
One of the films that we'll be showing, it's a documentary, one where the director will be in attendance for it, is a film that has gotten some people looking at it slightly askew, I suppose. It was the documentary Boycott. That there are some corners of the Jewish community here that are a little concerned, maybe. I don't know if that's quite the right word. I don't want to put words in their mouths, but certainly have questions about the film and the sort of the premise behind it. Why was bringing something like that to the festival something that was worthy of consideration this year?
So, and it's kind of funny because I've had these conversations too, of why are we bringing something, or really the conversation started around after Sundance. I was just seeing some articles about programming and festival curation and how that works within film and what that means as far as things like censorship, or if it's a touchy subject or something like that. And I think really what it comes down to is just keeping an open perspective at the end of the day, and knowing that what we're really trying to do is spark conversation and get people talking. And so if you see something that you don't like, you're going to say something about it. But either way, that's starting a conversation. And I've posed these questions too, because at least from my perspective, the film program at the U that I studied in is housed under cultural studies. And
Oh, interesting.
yeah. And so that, because it's not a film production major, it's entirely like film theory and discourse analysis. So the major itself is called Studies in Cinema and Media Culture. And so really what I was studying was how people talk about things, who is saying it. Is it coming from, the New York Times, and what does it mean when they write an article within telling you to think a certain way or something like that? How does that inform what you think about it? And so I'm always checking in to see what we're screening, and having those questions kind of circulate in my mind of like, well, what does it mean that we're showing this film? And, we position ourselves as, this type of nonprofit organization, and then we're offering it up to our audiences. Like, how does that inform their opinion from seeing the movie, or from beforehand and then after they watch it? Does that kind of make sense?
That does make sense. That does make sense. And I do, can certainly appreciate with a situation like with Boycott that, like I said, you have the director who's going to be there. There are other films and documentaries, and with the film with Bring Her Home, the director, which is again not one of Jewish content. The director of that film is going to be at the screening as well, answering questions. So you do create these opportunities where if people have questions, they should come and speak to the source.
Yes. Yes. And so then now I pulled up my little page for Boycott. And so I guess what I would say is that I'm not really going to say my opinion per se on it, because I really do believe it's 3 Jews, 10 opinions or something, whatever that saying is. And
two Jews, 3 opinions, but I think we're vastly underselling it. I think you're probably more correct.
And I would, though, especially if this film Boycott is stirring up, a lot of feelings in the community, I would even more so than implore that they attend the screening and come to the Q&A, but also to come with an open mind. Because when you think about it too, who is the filmmaker? And Julia Baca, she started her career in Cairo, Egypt. And so her perspective being outside of America is going to be entirely different, than our experience here. And what I like to do, especially with something like BDS, which is very, very touchy for pretty much everyone. I know, at least from my experience, that I was always able to be Jewish on campus, whether that involved anything related to Israel or it related strictly to the religious side of things and Shabbat and whatnot. And being able to have that experience where I can be, freely Jewish on campus, that was great. And I love that. And I love that students today are able to do that. And so, yeah, just a different perspective, see what someone else has to say. I like to be open, though. I like to see the best in everything. So I always try to I don't want to be angry to begin with,
That's probably a good place to try and start from, generally speaking.
Like if I end up getting angry and I need to, then that needed to happen. But I'd rather start calm and happy and hopeful and see where that takes me.
Seems like a reasonable place to try to start from. So you mentioned that coming to the University of Minnesota, it was sort of the first time you had met somebody who hadn't met another Jew. Where did you come to the U from? What's your story that brought you to Minnesota?
So I came to the U my junior year, transferring from Emerson College in Boston. And so it's actually kind of funny. I always make the joke that I left film school to study film. Emerson is a big film and communications school.
Okay.
And before that, I grew up primarily in Randolph, New Jersey, which is in Morris County. So I'm sure that there will be some transplants that maybe know of that area. And then after living in New Jersey until 2010, we moved to Charlotte, North Carolina, where I was actually surprised at how strong of a Jewish community I felt they had there, which was awesome. In the South, I was expecting like the worst, and it was great.
That's good. See, I mean, that's like your attitude towards things. You expect the best, and then get angry if you need to.
Exactly.
So you said to learn film, you needed to leave a film school. So was the program at the U a little more suited to what you wanted to get out of the film school experience than Emerson was?
Oh, entirely. And it was, I felt honestly just lucky because I had no idea that the University of Minnesota offered this kind of program. And so, yeah, most schools, they offer just film production. So you're learning cinematography, you're learning the basics of lighting a scene and how to storyboard and things like that. And they'll do classes on, multicam or single camera. And so you're really getting, down in the dirt. And so most of my friends now who graduated with their film degrees from Emerson, they do freelance work. Some of them are working at Netflix, but they're doing hands-on work in the development and production of projects, of films, TV shows, things like that. And I have no interest in that.
Sure. I mean, look, there's a lot, but I think what you went on to do and are doing, but what you got out of the U and what your friends got out of Emerson is that there are lots of ways to be involved in the film world without, being the next Spielberg, for example.
Yes.
What was it about film though, specifically that sort of has you down this path?
Well, I have always loved movies, and even my mom too. My mom actually, she used to be an actress, and then she worked as a talent agent on Broadway before she had me.
Oh, wow.
So I've always just really been exposed to the arts, I guess you could say.
Sure.
I grew up, going to musical theater on Broadway and just always watching movies. And I remember growing up in our house in New Jersey, we had a great setup in the living room, and we had these windowsills that had kind of a bench, and we would lift up the bench and my parents' DVD collection would be in there. And so I think it was like Friday night, me and my brother would just sit down and go through all the DVDs that they had and choose one to watch for movie night. And so I've always just loved watching, and the theme for my bat mitzvah was actually the Oscars. So, yeah.
That's awesome. So what is it? So that's what brought you to the Twin Cities. What is it that's kept you here? Because obviously so many times people will graduate and they'll either move back home or they'll, find something somewhere else. But obviously, you made the choice to stay. What was it that sort of went into that?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, at first, like me 2 years ago, would not believe that I would still be here today. Because I will say it was definitely difficult transitioning. I really felt like the Midwest was nothing like anywhere else I had lived before, just kind of hard to find my footing. And so, especially my senior year of college was really tough on me. And I was just spending a lot of time in my professor's office hours, kind of asking for their guidance if they had any advice. And just from there, I worked really hard on kind of building a little community for myself here and just putting myself out there and going to the various theaters that we have around town and taking my professor's on things that I should do. And so, like, one of my professors encouraged me to reach out to the Trilon to submit an essay because they do a blog, and they will let really anyone write something about it. You just have to ask about what films they're screening. But he told me, you're a good writer. You should really consider just reaching out and seeing if they're interested in putting one of your pieces on the website. And then from there, I became friends with one of the women who edits the Trilons blog. And, you know, when you start to do those little things, you're slowly building community and making friends and like feeling like you belong. And so I feel like I worked really hard to do that and to reach out to people when they told me to. And now I really like it here. And I feel like I have that community, and the thought of leaving makes me feel weird. And we do have a really great film scene too. Like my dad wanted me to move back to Charlotte during the pandemic, and I was thinking about it, and I was like, well, if I were to go back, I have no films there. There was one independent movie theater in Charlotte that closed down during the pandemic, and right now they're actually building a whole new theater there. But otherwise, there's nothing there like we have here. We have so many local independent theaters here doing really cool things, really cool programming, stuff that's not just film. And I want to be here for it all.
Well, it's great that we have this. I mean, I know that the arts scene in general in the Twin Cities has always been sort of lauded, but that it extends to, I know that sort of things on stage get a lot more airplay than films do. So it's great that it's great that we have that kind of film scene also, and that it's become a place that you can stick around and thrive in. Last couple questions for you, and we will get you on your way. Not at all related to the film festival or anything else with films. What is your favorite Jewish holiday?
Oh gosh. Oh, my favorite holiday actually is Passover. Okay. And it is because of what we would do for it. My grandma, she lives just outside of Boston, and she would invite everyone over, even some of her friends that weren't Jewish, for huge seders that were catered. She would not even cook it. Like she's a bougie grandma, but it was really, really fun. Me and my brother always used to call her house the museum, but in like a positive way. Like it was very true. Like, don't touch anything, kids. But there was so many cool things to look at, and it would just be so many people. And she would get these mini like toy versions of the plagues. And so we would get to like, when she would call out like frogs, we would throw these little like rubber like frog things all over at everyone on the tables. And so we just had a lot of fun kind of getting to do that kind of stuff. And so it's really, I guess, the memories of that really make me love Passover.
That's awesome. What is your favorite Jewish food?
That's hard to say. I really like everything, really bad with favorites, but my reason was that over Passover, my dad cooked Sephardic hard-boiled eggs, which I never had before, and he tried to cook them just the way his mom used to. And so they're slow cooked over like 5 hours with a bunch of like onions and garlic and maybe even like vinegar or something. So they turn kind of brown, but they have such an amazing flavor. They tasted so good.
Fascinating. I'd never heard of that before. That's incredible.
It was really, really good.
Oh, that sounds really good. Well, Becca Mayo, thank you so much for joining me today to talk all things film festival. And if you're listening to this and you're interested, use the code when you purchase tickets at the film festival website, the code TCJF MSPIFF41, and we'll have that and the link to buy tickets in the show notes. But that discount code was made available by Becca for our listeners and readers to get tickets at a discount to join in some amazing films, and we'll have more details on everything. Check the article on TC Jewfolk from last week, but we will have more in the show notes and links and everything for people. But Becca, thank you so much. It was a pleasure to meet you, and thanks for coming on.
Can I say one last thing?
Of course.
One last thing is just that because you said earlier, we have so many films from all over the world, but they still have that Jewish interest. And that, to me, is the best part about being Jewish, is that we do have a world community where different Jews may not practice the same way. We have different traditions in different parts of the world, but it is so amazing that we get to learn about each other through these films. And I'm so excited for that.
And there's so many opportunities, so hopefully people will find at least one or two interesting ways to explore and learn more, because there are really so many great options that people should take part of.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you again, Becca.
Thank you so much.
The Who the Folk podcast is part of the Jewfolk Podcast Network, a product of Jewfolk Inc. Please subscribe, rate, and review the show wherever you get your podcasts. If you have suggestions for other podcast guests, please email them to me at editor@tcjewfolk.com. For our other shows, check out tcjewfolk.com/podcast.